Earlier in the week, the 2025 Intra-African Trade Fair, which was hosted by Algeria, closed its curtains. Well, Nigeria will now host the next edition. One of the primary objectives of the Intra-African Trade Fair is to boost intra-African trade significantly over the coming years. And this fair is actually being promoted by the African Export-Import Bank, the African Union Commission, and the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So tonight, Babajide Ogunsanwo, who is the founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's chief data analyst, is here to share the latest facts and the vital insight about Nigeria's trade relationship with the rest of Africa. Thank you very much, Babajide, for joining us on the News at 10.
Yeah, good evening, Anne.
Good evening. And the 2025 edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair has ended, as we know, and Nigeria will be hosting the next edition of that trade fair. So far in 2025, how much trade has Nigeria done globally?
There are several ways we could really put how much trade Nigeria has done globally, but there are three ways I want to put it so that we have a clear understanding of what's going on. The first is this week as well, even though we saw the Intra-African Trade Fair come to a close, the National Bureau of Statistics also released Nigeria's latest trade data. What did they say? First half of this year, and Nigeria's total trade January to June, 75 trillion naira. But you might think that sounds like a big number, 75 trillion naira. 75 trillion naira is the equivalent of only $48 billion. That's what Nigeria has total trade volumes between January to June, the equivalent of $48 billion. But Anne, the United States trades $48 billion in just 3 days. So what Nigeria has done in 6 months has taken the United States only 3 months to do. Now, yes, these nations are different, developed versus developing. But the point I'm making, Anne, is not that we should compare Nigeria to the United States. It is that we need to start asking ourselves the questions. What is Nigeria's trade volume target? What are our goals? What do we want to achieve? And what exactly and how are we driving our comparative advantage? Because we have to know what exactly are we trying to achieve with our trade. Point one. Now, Anne, here's my second point, and I want you to listen carefully. Perhaps it's the most important of the 3 points. Point two is, yes, Africa, 30 million square kilometer land area, 54 countries, but there's one product that Africans trade among themselves better than any other country, better than any other continent. What product am I talking about? Blames. In Africa, we know how to trade blames amongst ourselves very well. Followers trade blames and blame the leaders. Leaders blame the previous leaders who blame the previous leaders who then end up to see that the first person to blame. So we need to move away from being experts in trading blames amongst ourselves to trading in goods and services, trading in ideas. However, Africa currently ranks #1 when it comes to trading of blames between leaders, between countries, which has to stop. Now, here's the third point. The third point is, let's take a look at not just our trade data for the first half of this year, let's look at what has happened in our trade data, the first half of 2023, first half of 2024, and first half of 2025. The fact shows that our export intensity, which more or less is a sign of how exports are performing, first half of 2023, 54%, first half of 2024, 61%, first half of 2025, 59%. So if we're to look at trade performance based on export intensity, yes, we're exporting a bit better, not significantly better, but we're exporting a bit better than we're importing compared to 2020. So that's some good news looking at our export intensity performance.
But what are the highlights of the just concluded Intra-African trade deal? And when we look at the outlook for trade among Africans, what will it be like?
And even though we've talked about the good news, that's where the bad news is that as Africans, as Nigerians, if you look at how much we are trading between amongst ourselves, we start asking ourselves, should this trade fair have happened in Algeria? Or maybe we should have gone to the United Kingdom or United States to have an intra-African trade. What am I talking about? Let's take a look at Nigeria's trade relationship with other African countries in the chart of the week. what we've seen is we are about in the same place. First half of 2023, yes, our total trade volumes 24 trillion naira. How much of that was trade within African countries? Only 7%. Look at the first half of this year. Yes, total trade 74 trillion naira. What's our trade with African countries? Only 9%. The point is, trade, Nigeria's trade with other African countries is less than 10% of its total trade. And if we keep going at this slow, at this snail speed, before Nigeria gets to 50% of its trade volumes with even other African countries, we're talking about 2065. So clearly, Nigeria's trade relative to being an African giant is significantly lacking behind.
But quickly, Babajide, how can we Africans reduce trade barriers among different African countries, and what is the future of made in Africa goods?
For me, the first thing is, when we talk about made in Africa, for me, it's seven words, and that is, what does Africa bring to the table? Every country must be able to answer that question. What does your country bring to the table? And I like the way Governor Duyediri put it yesterday, and that's, if you take a look at his statement on one of the ways to grow trade, his position is intra-African trade will not grow from the top down, but from the ground up. Let Nigeria's local governments trade among themselves. Let our states do business with each other, and the flow of commerce across Africa will multiply. And so, yes, countries doing trade with each other is good, but let's start from the ground up. Let's our local governments, also on the so-called local governments, let's start trading amongst ourselves even before we go to the global stage. That is one good way to go, from the ground up. And
thank you very much. Babajide Ogunso, founder of Leadership by Data, and of course Channels Television's Chief Data Analyst. Thanks for your time.
let's not forget, let's stop trading blames as Africans.
We will.